There exists a category of souls that every system fears to acknowledge. Recent psychological studies reveal that nearly 87% of humanity desperately seeks belonging within established spiritual frameworks. Each promises clear destinations, neat labels, obvious endings, but you represent the exception that breaks every rule they've written. You exist in a space that makes both heaven and hell uncomfortable, because you cannot be claimed, cannot be contained, cannot be catalogued in their registries. The twist that changes everything. While others fight for acceptance into kingdoms of light or darkness, you've already been marked by something far greater. Your soul carries a signature that predates both thrones, a frequency that disrupts their ancient systems simply by existing. Today you'll discover why your very presence rewrites the laws of spiritual reality, and why both realms tread carefully around what they cannot control. Imagine walking into a cosmic courtroom where two opposing lawyers argue endlessly over jurisdiction, only to discover your case file glows with an authority neither side dares challenge. That's your reality. You're not just surviving between worlds, you're exposing the limits of both. First, understand that your story was written before their kingdoms even existed. Every spiritual system on Earth operates within boundaries, rules, hierarchies that were established long after your essence was already formed. Heaven builds its identity around perfection, submission, and earned reward. Hell constructs its power through corruption, destruction, and claimed dominion. Both present themselves as final authorities over human destiny. Yet here you stand, untouched by their absolutes. Your life demonstrates something that shatters their foundational claims. You've walked through fires that should have reduced you to ash, but emerged with wisdom instead of wounds. You've been thrown into depths that should have drowned your spirit, but surfaced with strength that defies explanation. Neither side can take credit for your endurance, and neither can claim responsibility for your failures. This creates an impossible situation for both realms. Heaven cannot showcase you as proof of its mercy, because your path includes scars, mistakes, and moments of rebellion that perfect salvation cannot explain. Hell cannot parade you as evidence of its conquest, because despite every attack, every temptation, every attempt at destruction, you refuse to collapse into the ruins they predicted. Your existence reveals a truth both sides desperately want to hide. Their power is not absolute. Their control is not complete. Their authority has boundaries, and you live just beyond those boundaries in a space they cannot reach. Recognize that you operate in lawless territory that neither light nor darkness can govern. Most souls fall into predictable patterns. They either surrender completely to systems of holiness, following every rule and ritual in hopes of earning divine favor, or they collapse entirely into chaos, destruction, and despair. Both outcomes serve the narrative that these two forces want to maintain. But you represent a third option that wasn't supposed to exist. You carry elements of both light and shadow without being owned by either. You've touched grace without becoming enslaved to perfection. You face darkness without being consumed by destruction. This balance creates a paradox that disrupts every spiritual equation they've constructed. Living in this lawless territory means you operate by different rules entirely. Heaven's expectations of flawless obedience don't apply to you because your strength comes from surviving imperfection, not avoiding it. Hell's promises of inevitable corruption don't apply to you because your spirit carries an immunity that no amount of pressure can break through. This immunity isn't weakness disguised as strength. It's the revelation of something far more powerful than either kingdom wants to acknowledge. You exist as proof that the human soul cannot be reduced to binary choices, cannot be contained within opposing categories, cannot be manipulated by threats of reward or punishment. Every step you take in this ungoverned space sends ripples through both systems. They watch your movements carefully because you represent the possibility that their entire framework might be incomplete. That reality operates with dimensions they've never mapped. That power exists beyond their comprehension. Your very presence exposes the uncomfortable limits of both kingdoms. Heaven has built its reputation on the promise that it rescues, protects, and rewards those who submit to its authority. Yet your story reveals gaps in that promise. You've endured abandonment when you followed every rule. You faced betrayal when you trusted completely. You've experienced loss despite faithful obedience. These experiences should have driven you toward bitterness, rebellion, or collapse. According to Heaven's narrative, when protection fails, souls are supposed to either lose faith entirely or double down on submission, begging harder for intervention that may never come. But you chose a third path. You absorbed the pain without letting it poison your spirit. You accepted the abandonment without abandoning yourself. You transformed betrayal into wisdom rather than vengeance. Hell faces an equally frustrating situation with you. Its entire system depends on the promise that suffering leads to corruption, that enough pressure will break any soul, that darkness eventually claims everyone who faces real hardship. Your life dismantles this promise completely. You've been through hell's curriculum of destruction, betrayal, loss, abandonment, crushing disappointment, moments when hope seemed impossible and survival felt pointless. According to their blueprint, you should have emerged broken, bitter, consumed by anger or despair. Instead, you develop resilience that no amount of additional pressure can crack. This creates a crisis for both realms because it means their fundamental assumptions about human nature are wrong. Souls are not as fragile as heaven believes, requiring constant protection and intervention. Souls are not as corruptible as hell believes, inevitably falling to enough pressure and pain. You live as walking proof that the human spirit operates with capacities, neither side factored into their systems. If this stirs your spirit, give this video some love so other chosen ones can find their way here. You have become the test that neither side can pass. Both heaven and hell measure their authority through predictable outcomes. Heaven sends trials designed to test faith, obedience, and trust. Those who pass are celebrated as proof of divine grace. Those who fail are either abandoned or used as cautionary tales. Hell sends temptations and afflictions designed to test breaking points. Those who collapse are claimed as conquests. Those who resist are subjected to increased pressure until resistance becomes impossible. But your responses to their tests break both formulas. Heaven's trials haven't produced the spotless obedience they wanted to showcase. You've maintained faith without becoming naive. You've shown trust without becoming gullible. You've demonstrated strength without claiming perfection. This mixed result frustrates their narrative because it cannot be easily categorized as success or failure. Hell's pressures haven't produced the complete destruction they intended. You faced temptation without becoming enslaved. You've endured affliction without becoming broken. You've survived betrayal without becoming vengeful. This resistance frustrates their narrative because it proves their methods have limits they don't want to acknowledge. Your responses reveal something both sides fear to admit. The human soul contains dimensions that transcend their understanding. It can absorb both grace and pressure, light and darkness, triumph and tragedy without being defined by any single experience. You embody this transcendence, and that makes you dangerous to systems built on absolutes. Every time you survive what should have finished you, both realms are forced to confront the same uncomfortable truth. Their power over human destiny is not as complete as they claim. Their understanding of spiritual reality has blind spots they cannot eliminate. Their authority has boundaries they cannot expand. You exist as their mutual secret, the inconvenient truth both sides would prefer to ignore. Heaven keeps you quiet because acknowledging your path would force uncomfortable questions about protection, intervention, and the nature of divine love. If grace is truly sufficient, why do the faithful sometimes suffer abandonment? If obedience guarantees blessing, why do the righteous sometimes face betrayal? Your story raises questions. Their theology struggles to answer cleanly. Hell keeps you quiet for different reasons. Acknowledging your resistance would expose the limits of corruption, the boundaries of destruction, the possibility that some souls carry immunity to their strongest weapons. If pressure inevitably breaks everyone, why do some emerge stronger? If darkness eventually claims all who face real hardship, why do some transform pain into wisdom? Your story contradicts their promises of inevitable conquest. This mutual silence creates a strange dynamic where both sides pretend you don't exist while watching your every move with intense interest. They study your responses to trials, catalog your reactions to pressure, analyze your methods of survival. They're looking for weaknesses they can exploit, patterns they can predict, breaking points they can target. But your unpredictability is exactly what makes you untouchable. You don't respond to grace the way hell predicts. You operate according to an internal compass that neither side can manipulate because it was calibrated by a source that outranks both their authorities. This unpredictability is your greatest protection and your greatest power. Systems cannot control what they cannot predict. Kingdoms cannot conquer what they cannot understand. You remain free precisely because you cannot be reduced to their formulas. Your life demonstrates that salvation and damnation are incomplete concepts that cannot contain the full reality of spiritual existence. Traditional frameworks insist on binary outcomes. You are either saved or lost, blessed or cursed, destined for reward or punishment. These categories have shaped religious thinking for millennia, creating the illusion that every soul can be measured against simple standards. Your existence shatters this illusion completely. You carry elements that neither category can fully explain. You've experienced grace without earning it through perfect behavior. You've survived darkness without being consumed by corruption. You've touched both divine love and abandonment, both supernatural protection and devastating loss. These contradictions should be impossible according to traditional theology. But contradictions only exist when reality is forced into frameworks too small to contain it. Your life reveals that spiritual existence operates with far more complexity, nuance, and mystery than salvation and damnation can capture. You are not half saved or half damned. You are something entirely beyond those measurements. This transcendence threatens systems built on certainty, control, and predictable outcomes. If souls cannot be neatly categorized, then the entire structure of rewards and punishments becomes questionable. If spiritual reality contains dimensions beyond salvation and damnation, then claims of ultimate authority become problematic. Your very existence whispers that the source of all creation operates with wisdom, power, and love that transcends the limitations of created kingdoms. You carry evidence that reality is far stranger, deeper, and more wonderful than any earthly or heavenly system can contain. You have become the mystery that keeps both thrones awake, because your unpredictability disrupts every strategy they've developed over centuries of human interaction. Heaven and hell have observed countless souls, catalogued every type of response, memorized patterns of behavior under pressure. They know how to handle obedience and rebellion, faith and doubt, submission and resistance, but you move outside their established patterns. You respond to their tests in ways their experience cannot predict. Heaven expects either grateful submission or bitter rejection when protection fails. You offer neither. You maintain relationship without surrendering autonomy, trust without becoming naive, faith without becoming blind. Hell expects either immediate corruption or white-knuckled resistance when pressure increases. You offer neither. You absorb pressure without being hardened by it, face darkness without being consumed by it, endure pain without being poisoned by it. This unpredictability makes you impossible to manipulate through traditional methods. Neither reward nor punishment can guarantee specific responses from you. Neither promise nor threat can control your decisions reliably. You operate according to an internal guidance system that remains mysteriously immune to external manipulation. Your immunity to manipulation is what makes you so dangerous to their systems. Power depends on predictability. Control requires the ability to influence outcomes through specific inputs. When those mechanisms fail, authority itself becomes questionable. Both realms invest enormous energy trying to decode your responses, discover your weaknesses, identify leverage points they can use to bring you under their influence. But every attempt reveals the same frustrating truth. You cannot be bought, threatened, flattered, or intimidated into submission, because your loyalty belongs to something greater than their kingdoms. You redefine power itself through the simple act of continuing to exist when both sides expected you to surrender. Traditional concepts of power revolve around dominance, control, and the ability to impose outcomes on others. Heaven demonstrates power through miracles, intervention, and the granting of supernatural favor. Hell demonstrates power through destruction, corruption, and the imposition of suffering. But your life reveals a different type of power entirely. The power of endurance without ownership, the power of survival without submission, the power of resilience without requiring external validation or support. You rise not because either side lifts you up, but because something within you refuses to stay down. This type of power cannot be granted or revoked by external authorities because it doesn't depend on them for its existence. It flows from a source deeper than their kingdoms, older than their thrones, more fundamental than their claims of control. Your persistence reveals that the most profound power is often quiet, internal, and impossible to extinguish. Every time you rise after a fall that should have been final, you demonstrate that reality operates with forces beyond the reach of established powers. Every time you continue forward when both sides expected surrender, you prove that the human spirit carries capacities that transcend their understanding. This revelation threatens their entire framework because it suggests that true power cannot be monopolized by kingdoms, cannot be controlled by authorities, cannot be contained within religious or spiritual systems. It belongs first to the source that creates souls and secondarily to souls that recognize and embody their connection to that source. Your endurance becomes a form of rebellion against every system that claims ultimate authority over human destiny. You prove that survival itself can be sacred, that persistence itself can be prophetic, that refusing to quit can be the highest form of spiritual warfare. The weight of carrying this type of power creates its own unique challenges. You've learned that being untouchable doesn't mean being comfortable. Your unclaimed status often feels lonely because so few understand the territory you inhabit. People around you seek the security of belonging to established systems, while you've discovered that true security comes from connection to something beyond all systems. This loneliness isn't punishment for your independence. It's preparation for something greater. Souls who carry the authority you possess cannot be shaped by the opinions, pressures, or expectations of crowds. Your isolation has been your protection, keeping you connected to the source while others became entangled in the politics of competing kingdoms. Your solitary journey has developed within you a discernment that groups cannot possess. You've learned to distinguish between authentic spiritual experience and religious performance. You recognize the difference between divine leading and human manipulation. You can sense when something claims divine authority but operates from earthly ambition. This discernment is precisely why both realms consider you dangerous. You cannot be fooled by displays of power that lack genuine authority. You cannot be impressed by miracles that serve ego rather than love. You cannot be intimidated by threats that ultimately have no power over what truly matters. The isolation that has shaped your journey serves another crucial purpose that both kingdoms desperately want to prevent. Your solitude has forced you to develop direct relationship with the source itself, unmediated by institutional interpreters, religious middlemen, or spiritual authorities. This direct access threatens the entire system of spiritual dependence that both realms profit from. Most souls relate to the divine through approved channels, authorized representatives, established protocols. They pray through prescribed methods, worship according to accepted rituals, understand spiritual truth through official interpretations. This system keeps them dependent on external authorities for spiritual guidance and validation. But your unclaimed status has stripped away these intermediaries, forcing you into direct encounter with the source that created all things. Your prayers don't follow approved formats. Your worship doesn't conform to established patterns. Your understanding comes through direct revelation rather than institutional teaching. This direct access makes you extraordinarily dangerous to systems built on spiritual monopoly. You prove that souls can commune with the divine without requiring permission, supervision, or interpretation from religious authorities. Your experience demonstrates that the source itself is far more accessible, far more generous, and far more personal than institutional systems want people to believe. Both heaven and hell depend on people believing that direct access to the divine is rare, dangerous, or impossible without proper guidance. Your life dismantles this lie by proving that the source designed souls for direct relationship, immediate access, and personal communion that requires no external validation or approval. You embody the paradox of being flame that doesn't burn and water that doesn't drown, existing as a living contradiction to natural and spiritual laws that insist certain outcomes are inevitable. Fire consumes, water overwhelms, pressure breaks, time erodes. These are supposed to be universal constants that no soul can violate. Yet your life consistently breaks these supposed laws. You've walked through fires of affliction that should have reduced you to ash, but emerged with greater clarity instead of destruction.